What's up and welcome back to the Metalhead Car Show. Anyone who's been a part of this channel for a little while knows I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan. And being May 2023 means this is the month that the Future Past Tour will finally start. So, within May, you can expect a little bit of Iron Maiden content happening, especially the week of the tour. As for now, I want to go and rank every single Iron Maiden album from worst to best and see where they land. So, in 17th place, starting off with Fear of the Dark. Fear of the Dark! It wouldn't be any points, but I stand by it. Fear of the Dark is coming last because it was kind of this really weird, rough patch for Iron Maiden. With Iron Maiden, Bruce and Steve weren't really seeing eye to eye, they weren't really working well together. Bruce was in a real big, rough patch vocally, and I believe he described his music career at that point as he's in a rut, and that led to him leaving Iron Maiden the year after Fear of the Dark. And it kind of shows in the album. There are some wicked songs in this album, do not get me wrong, but there's a lot of filler on the album, and even like the really good songs aren't super high on my list of like best Iron Maiden songs. I think because of songs like Be Quick or Be Dead, Fear of the Dark, Afraid to Shoot Strangers, this would be a really high one for a lot of people and an unpopular opinion. But it's due to some of the tones and Bruce's vocals and a lot of the writing, it winds up last for me. Alright, every album here on out's great. I love them all, I listen to all of them. Cool? Great? Done? Awesome. 16th place, No Prayer for the Dying. Refugees from the No Prayer for the Dying is a really fun album, don't get me wrong. I actively listen to this album a fair bit, but the issue with this album is there isn't that much in the way of those legacy songs or the legendary songs like some other albums have. The songs are a little bit weaker, the songs have kind of just been forgotten in time, and that's not really something that's going to bring the album down, but that does kind of show how Iron Maiden feels about these songs. Even the biggest single on the album. I once saw an interview with Bruce Dickinson. Somebody said they would play Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which is like the biggest single on the album. And Bruce kind of gave this, oh god, when they first started playing the song. And like that's something he wrote, and it was the biggest song off the album and still kind of gets that reception from Iron Maiden. It's great, it's fun, it's just very much not a strong album in comparison to a lot of the other albums Iron Maiden has. 15th place, Killers. So Killers winds up a little bit lower on the list for me, purely because apart from some songs of Killers, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Wrathchild, it just seems a little bit weaker, and it doesn't have any of the wow songs like some other albums do. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of songs off this album I would love to hear live, such as Drifter, Killer, Murders in the Rue Morgue, Another Life, but it just doesn't have the wow factor of some other albums, and for me that brings it down a little bit. It's a great album, but it's one of the albums I kind of go to a little bit less often than others, and I think purely because of that maybe, I put it a little bit lower on the list. 14th place, Virtual 11. What is real? Future real? What is real? Future real? I generally really like Virtual 11. I listen to this album a lot, but I'm not going to ignore some of its issues. I find in this album the guitar tones were weak. They're probably the weakest on this album than any other Iron Maiden album, other than X Factor. Going from Virtual 11 to like Brave New World, you can see a massive jump in guitar tone, and it almost seemed like it was something they deemed important by Brave New World. But on Virtual 11, it's kind of one of the issues. But with that said, it's still a pretty high energy, fun album. It was the first album to use Drop D. It was the first album, I believe, that used timing in 5. So they really played around with this album. They kind of had fun making it. I think one of the only reasons this album gets kind of a bad rep is because Angel the Gambler, which for those who don't know, Angel the Gambler was actually made one of the main singles off the album, and when they made the single version of it, they actually cut it down by almost 50%, and I think the single version ended up being like 4.5 minutes long. Even the live version was 2 minutes shorter than the studio version. But just because it has that one song doesn't mean it's a terrible album. It still has Lightning Strikes Twice, Clansman, Futureal, Don't Look in the Eyes of a Stranger, called Como Este Amigo. It's generally a really good album. It's just not as good as some other ones. 13th place, The X Factor. The X Factor gets a pretty interesting album. It gets a lot of hate because it's a pretty mid-tempo album. It's very dark, and for a lot of people it's very hard to get into. But once you really listen to it, you can kind of see this album's actually really, really good. It opens with one of the most unorthodox opening songs on any Iron Maiden album, being Sign of the Cross. And the first 4 songs of the album, Sign of the Cross, Man of the Edge, Lord of the Flies, Fortunes of War. That's a really strong start to an album. This album does get a little bit of criticism because it is a pretty dark album, and not a lot of people love Blaze Bayley's vocals on it. But truthfully, it being Blaze Bayley's first album with Iron Maiden, Steve Harris is still trying to figure out how to work with his vocals. And this was a dark period in Steve Harris's life. He was just going through from what I recall, a pretty nasty divorce. He just lost his singer of like 12 or 13 years, being Bruce Dickinson. Metal itself wasn't in a particularly great place in the world that time, and it was just a hard time. Blaze Bayley's always kind of claimed it doesn't matter who is singing on that album or what the album is going to be. That album's going to get a lot of negativity when it came out in 1995, just due to what a lot of people were really into at that point. Is he right? I don't know. We'll never know. That's not how things worked, but nonetheless, I really like it. It really benefited from some better guitar tones, but nonetheless, it got some wicked guitar solos, got some awesome songs, and I think a slight reorganization, have the album open with Judgment Day, this album would be a lot higher on the list. 12th place, Iron Maiden. The first Iron Maiden album, the album that contains Phantom of the Opera, great album. Along with being the first full-length studio Iron Maiden album, it was also the only album to have Dennis Stratton on lead guitar, along with Dave Murray. This album's solid. I think the only song I don't really like on it is Charlotte the Harlot, but honestly, it's great. Its only downside is the production could be a lot better on the album, and I think Paul Di'Anno's vocals are kind of okay on the album, which is not going to be the popular opinion. Let's say Iron Maiden kind of went and did a dirty move and re-recorded this album in like 1985. It'd probably be one of the best Iron Maiden albums ever. My only honest-to-God complaint that frustrates me is on a lot of streaming services, they've actually removed Sanctuary from the album, and I generally miss listening to that version, but what are you gonna do? That's nothing to do with Iron Maiden. 11th place, The Final Frontier. The Final Frontier! This isn't everyone's favorite album, but it has a really special place in my heart because it was the first brand new album coming out for me being into Iron Maiden. When I was getting into them, I think they were actually on the A Matter of Life and Death tour, but this album was a little bit later than that. I got to see it come out and pre-order the album and see them on the tour. It was a big deal for me. This album also has a lot of really, really awesome songs on it. El Dorado, Talisman, When the Wild Winds Blow, Coming Home, Final Frontier, The Alchemist. Like, it's a really great album. And it's one of the very few albums Dave Murray kind of started tinkering with its tones and made some kind of really unique sounding solos with it. It's a little bit lower on the list because there's just a couple songs that just never have the urge to listen to, like Starblind or Isles of Avalon, where they're not bad songs, they're just not my favorites. And I don't skip them, but I never go out of my way to actually hear them. Also, there's the debate with the Final Frontier, whether the mascot on the front of it is Eddie or not. I say absolutely it is 100% Eddie. Eddie has taken many shapes and forms over the years. This time he was an alien. It's Eddie. That's that. Moving on. 10th place, The Book of Souls. The Book of Souls is a fantastic album, but it has a handful of faults. I think the song arrangement's kind of super weird. I think it's really focused on the first half and then kind of slapped together for the second, which makes it a little bit weird to listen to. And truthfully, I think if you cut some songs like Man of Sorrows and Tears of a Clown, this album would actually be a lot stronger than it actually is. What I love with this album is you kind of see how much they liked it. When they did the Book of Souls tour, I think they were actually touring on 6 new songs, being If Eternity Should Fail, Speed of Light, The Red and the Black, The Book of Souls, Death and Glory, Tears of a Clown, and eventually adding in The Great Unknown. I always like when bands tour on new material on a new album tour. It sounds like a very basic thing, but also looking at Megadeth's current setlist, there is 1 new song in this new album tour. So it's just something I like seeing. And I think when bands do that, it's kind of showing they like the album. When I saw Motorhead on their final tour, they didn't play a single new song in that tour, which is a shame because that album was awesome. If a couple songs were dropped and the organization was changed a little bit, this album would probably be higher than it is. So I really, really like this album. 9th place, 7th Son of a 7th Son. For the 5 people who are still here, thank you very much. 7th Son's great. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. Anything I need to say that's bad about 7th Son, 7th Son's kind of splitting hairs. Like, I think it's a little bit overproduced here and there, maybe. There's some effects that don't need to be there. But honestly, I don't have much bad to say about it. I think it's a little bit lower down because of all the 80s albums, it's one of the few I don't go back to very often. And truly, I'm not sure why. Because 7th Son, 7th Son, Moonchild, Infinite Dreams, Clairvoyant, all fantastic songs. Yeah, maybe it's just because I don't go back to it very often. Maybe that's why it's a little bit lower down. 8th place, Senjutsu. I have not got much love for this opinion, but I truly think if you dropped The Darkest Hour, this would be probably the best post-reunion album Maiden has. It's dark, it's moody, adds some elements Maiden hasn't done before, and I think this album is killer. It has an awesome start with Senjutsu, Stratego, and Writing the Wall. It has a wicked end with Death of the Celts, Parchment, Hell on Earth. And I complain a little bit about Darkest Hour because it's just my least favorite song in the album. But it being placed right before all the epics almost seems like the right choice and perfect spot for that song. So as much as I don't love it, it's kind of placed in the album beautifully. Only complaints with it, I don't love the keyboard tone, but honestly, yeah, whatever. As much as I don't love it, it still works really well. You can kind of hear Bruce's age in his voice, but he did a brilliant job doing vocal layering, and it actually sounds like some of his more impressive work he's done in years now. I was fortunate enough to get to see Iron Maiden play Senjutsu when they were in Ottawa back in October, and I got a feeling I'm probably not going to hear that song ever again. So I'm super happy they played it because it is probably one of the best album opening songs Maiden's ever done. In 7th place, Peace of Mind. Peace of Mind was the first album to have Nico McBrain on drums, and I love the fact with Where Eagles Dare, the first thing you hear is Nico's drum fill. Great way to get the album going. Truthfully, I think this is like one of the best laid out albums they've ever done, and it's very much of its time. Using a single in the, I guess what would be the side 2 of the album, which encouraged people to kind of flip the record. It's smart. It's so smart. Iron Maiden's not the only band that's done this, but I love it nonetheless. And the album's full of nothing but bangers. Like, the weakest song on it's probably Quest for Fire, and Quest for Fire is still a lot of fun. Whether if it may be the Iron Maiden's most historically inaccurate song ever written, I don't care. My only complaints with this is, on the Legacy of the Beast tour, it was the 35th anniversary of Peace of Mind. They were playing 4 Peace of Mind songs, so it kind of felt like they were treating that tour like that a little bit. I wish they played To Tame a Land. I really wish that song came out, and that's not gonna knock the album back a little bit. I'm just saying, come on, we were right there. Just play To Tame a Land. I think this album's missing one wow song. Like, there's no bad songs on it. I just think it needs that one song. Take that as you will. But nonetheless, amazing album. 6th place, Brave New World. Brave New World was, I believe, the first metal album I ever bought, and truthfully, I think it is one of Iron Maiden's strongest. Which, like, yeah, no shit, we're at 6th place of 17 albums. I think I've said in some other videos, but Brave New World holds a really strong place in my heart, because it's the album that got me into metal. I remember driving to school one time with my brothers, and they had this mixed CD made by one of their buddies that primarily had Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and probably Bolt Thrower on it. And we were driving around in this Volvo 940 station wagon, and Dreams and Mirrors was playing. And I loved just how the song changed and the speed changes, and going from acoustic guitar or clean guitar tones to heavy distort tones. I thought this was the coolest thing in the world. And I owe a lot of kind of what I'm doing now due to that song and that album. So it's always going to hold a really high place in my heart because of that. Along with being an awesome album. I think there may be like one weaker song, being like The Mercenary, but truthfully, I don't have anything bad to say about this album. It was a massive step up from Virtual 11. It was the first album with a Magnificent Six lineup, and truthfully, there's no crap on the album. Excellent, excellent album. 5th place, Dance of Death. When you're lying in the sleep, when you're lying in the bed, and you wait for the dreams to be dancing with the dead. When you're lying in your sleep, when you're lying in your bed, and you wait for the dreams to be dancing with the dead. I believe Dance of Death to be one of the most underrated Iron Maiden albums ever made. It has so many kind of really cool songs on it. Like, it was the first album to have a full acoustic song. It was the first album to have a kind of an epic or a really long song written by Adrian Smith. It was the first album to have a song with double bass pedal being Face in the Sand. It was also the first album to have a song written by Nico McBrain being Gates of Tomorrow. And you have some albums where you can see why these songs weren't singles or they weren't played live. This album doesn't have that effect. Right in the middle of the album, you have Monstergore, Gates of Tomorrow, and New Frontier. All of them are wicked. All of them are so good, and it's weird they weren't played live. I know they played the Matter of Life and Death album in start to finish. I truthfully think they could have done Dance of Death start to finish, and the show would have went down really well. I think this album gets overlooked a little bit. I think it gets kind of forgotten and kind of just laughed at due to its kind of atrocious album artwork. But frankly, I can ignore that and acknowledge this album for the masterpiece that it truly is. In 4th place, Somewhere in Time. This is probably one of the most unique 1980s Iron Maiden albums ever. It was the first kind of experimental album where they used more synthesizers in the album and just kind of making a really cool and unique product. I also remember just being amazed by hearing Caught Somewhere in Time for the first time and hear that really long, epic guitar solo between Adrian Smith and Dave Murray. And it just has some wicked singles on it, like Wasted Years, Heaven Can Wait, and Stranger to Strangeland are all perfect choices. And what's wild about this album was it was almost going to be a more acoustic mid-tempo album. After Power Slave, that's the direction Bruce wanted to go. And I think everyone in the band kind of vetoed that idea, and we got arguably one of the best and kind of, till recently, most overlooked Iron Maiden albums ever. My only criticism towards this is they have yet to play Alexander the Great. I would have said they've never played Alexander the Great, but maybe in 3 weeks that might be a different story. Maybe if we all yell loud enough, they'll actually play it. 3rd place, The Number of the Beast. What can I possibly say that nobody else has said about Number of the Beast? It's a masterpiece. It's excellent start to finish. The only negative thing I could say about it is I don't love Total Eclipse, but whatever. This is also the last album with Clive Burr on it because he left because he had MS and he really knew he couldn't continue on drumming, and he does a killer job with this album. I remember it being Halloween 2009, maybe 2008, and kind of sitting in my room before we were going to go out and do whatever it was, likely trick-or-treating, and just listening to Hallowed Be Thy Name for the first time. Just wowed by it because it's so good, like nothing I've ever heard of before. And I think that album also has one of the strongest opening songs of any of the albums with Invaders, which unfortunately they've never played live. I don't think they're ever going to, but it's really cool that it exists at all. What's weird is, like, this was an album that some Iron Maiden fans actually fell off and stopped paying attention, which I find super weird, because looking at it now, 40 plus years later, it's considered to be the pinnacle or one of the best albums they ever did in their entire career, which I think is a pretty damn popular opinion. Anyway, great album. Second place, Power Slave.
Tell me why I had to be a power slave.
Zero bad songs, one of the best opening songs they've ever done, one of the best closing songs they've ever done. Like, what bad can I say about this? Like, Power Slave is just bangers start to finish, and there's no filler on it, there's no weak songs on it, and it closes with the first 10 plus minute song they ever wrote, which also ends up being like one of the biggest fan favorite songs ever written, being Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Now, kind of a fun thing about this album, a lot of people believe the songs that are played off it was Aces High, 2 Minutes of Midnight, Lost for Words, Power Slave, and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. But that isn't actually fully true. The only thing I want from this album is I want to hear the live footage of Back in the Village. It was played, it's documented that it was played, but audio just doesn't exist. I hate that so much. Not that it has anything to do with the album or its quality, but goddamn. And in first place, with all you already screaming at me for this decision, I don't care, it's my list. A Matter of Life and Death.
You lead me on the path, keep showing me the way.
I absolutely love this album so much. Start to finish, it's absolutely solid. It is arguably some of the best and most natural work from Bruce Dickinson. It contains my favorite song, written by Yannick Gears, being The Legacy. It has a lot of diversity on the album, but along with having a lot of epics on it and a solid opening song, and kind of along with a great opening song, this perfect start of different world, these colors don't run brighter than 1,000 suns. That's a great start to an album. And you have kind of one of these maybe forgotten gems, being one of the singles being the reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg. Like, god damn, it's such a dramatic yet cool song. Probably one of the heaviest Iron Maiden songs ever, with this wicked Dave Murray solo slammed right in the middle of it. If you really dig around, there's actually a really cool story in Benjamin Brieg. I'll let you be the one to figure that out, but yeah, it's just kind of a neat and really weird read. I've got nothing bad to say about this album. I think it is absolutely their best, which is not a popular opinion, but truthfully, I don't care. I love this album so much. So that's every single Iron Maiden album ranked. I assume it's going to be a long video. If you got here, thank you very much for sticking around. But I want to know, what do you think? What is your favorite Iron Maiden album? And if you have the time to put it in the comments, how would you rank the Iron Maiden albums? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen. I post on Tuesday, Friday, and Sunday, and I'll see you later.